Every day for the past 3 years, at precisely 6 in the morning, Frank Dawson would seek out the quiet sanctuary of his garage. Before him, the magnificent 1987 Harley Davidson sat in dignified silence, its chrome glinting under the cool fluorescent lights. At 68, Frank wasn't there to ride. He was simply there to commune with a memory, to yearn for the familiar thrum of its engine, a sound he knew so intimately. His weathered hands, still possessing the wisdom of an army mechanic, traced the contours of the machine. They remembered every bolt, every nuance, the slight dent in the tank, a relic of a fierce Montana storm, and the faded Sturgis sticker, marking the spot where Maria, his beloved wife, had once laughed so unrestrainedly she'd nearly tumbled from the back seat. Her worn leather jacket still hung beside his on the wall, testament to countless journeys where she'd clung to him, their bodies moving as one through every curve. Frank had served 22 years as an army mechanic before settling into the tranquil rhythm of Ashbrook. There, he'd opened a modest repair shop and forged a peaceful life with Maria, a school librarian who, surprisingly, had discovered a passion for motorcycles only after meeting him. Their very first date had been a tentative spin around the block. Their last, a sprawling cross-country odyssey to witness the vibrant autumn foliage of Vermont, merely 6 months before cancer cruelly claimed her. 3 years had passed since Maria's absence had left an aching void, and this Harley was the last tangible echo of their shared adventures, a silent sentinel of a love that defied time. What Frank couldn't foresee was that in a matter of hours he would be forced to confront an impossible decision, one that threatened to shatter his heart entirely. "Papa, why do you come out here every morning?" The innocent question, posed by his 8-year-old granddaughter Lily, pulled Frank from his reverie. She stood in the doorway, a small figure still clad in her pajamas. Lily had become a more frequent guest these days, her father Jake often working grueling double shifts at the manufacturing plant. "Just checking on things, sweetheart," Frank replied softly, turning to face her. Lily approached the imposing motorcycle with a cautious curiosity. Though she didn't fully grasp its significance, she instinctively knew this machine held a profound, almost sacred meaning for her grandfather. "Daddy says Grandma used to ride with you," she observed. "Every weekend for 30 years, Frank affirmed, his voice catching with a familiar ache of remembrance. Gently, he lifted Lily onto the very seat where Maria had once perched, her arms embracing him on their countless rides. For a fleeting instant, Frank could almost conjure Maria's presence there, her arms encircling both him and Lily, a vision of cherished completeness. But this tender, peaceful moment, like a fragile glass, was poised to shatter, giving way to news that would demand Frank make a heart-wrenching choice. An hour later, the quiet of the morning was broken by the arrival of Jake. One look at his son's face, etched with a weariness that seemed to have aged him 5 years overnight, told Frank everything he needed to know. At 34, Jake had shouldered the burden of raising Lily alone since her mother had departed, overwhelmed by the mounting medical bills. 2 years had passed since the divorce was finalized, yet the financial scars remained deep and unyielding. "Dad, we need to talk," Jake uttered, his voice heavy with unspoken anxieties. They settled at Frank's kitchen table, a familiar landscape of medical paperwork fanned out between them. These documents had become a persistent, unwelcome fixture in their lives since Lily's diagnosis 6 months prior. Juvenile dermatomyositis, a rare and relentless autoimmune condition that systematically attacked her muscles and skin. Dr. Patterson wants to increase Lily's dosage, Jake explained, his gaze fixed on the papers. He says she's responding well, but the doctor believes she needs a stronger form of medication. Oh, stronger form of medication to prevent permanent damage. Frank waited, the silence in the kitchen heavy with unspoken dread, for he knew instinctively that more devastating news was surely to follow. $14,000 for 6 months of treatment, Jake finally revealed, the words barely a whisper. Insurance covers less than half. We make too much for hardship programs, Dad, but not nearly enough to actually pay. The sheer magnitude of the figure slammed into Frank with the force of a physical blow. Jake, already a ghost of himself, was working an exhausting 60 hours a week at the plant, sacrificing nights to stock shelves, straining every fiber of his being. Frank's army pension provided for his basic needs, a modest comfort, but it was a mere drop in the ocean against the tidal wave of these medical expenses. His gaze drifted to the kitchen window, where Lily, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing indoors, played in the oboe. Her movements were still a little stiff, a cruel reminder of her condition, yet her spirit remained gloriously unbroken. She was sketching with chalk on the pavement, no doubt another colorful masterpiece destined for his refrigerator door. Frank's eyes then moved, almost involuntarily, to the garage, where the faithful Harley waited. A 1987 Heritage, in such pristine condition, would easily command $15,000. From the right collector, perhaps even more. That sum, he realized with a stark clarity, was enough. Enough for Lily's medication. Enough to give his precious granddaughter a fighting chance. I already lost one girl I'd die for, Frank said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, eyes still fixed on the garage. I'm not about to lose the other. Jake's head snapped up, a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension on his face. Dad, what are you saying? Let me make some calls. See what options we have. But Frank already knew. There was only one option that truly mattered, one that would work, and it would cost him the last tangible piece of Maria he had left. That evening, a profound solitude settled over Frank as he sat in the garage, wrestling with the decision he desperately wished he didn't have to make. He reached into the Harley's saddlebag, his fingers searching, until they closed around a folded piece of paper. It was Maria's handwriting, something she had hidden there, a secret message left during their very last trip together. My dearest Frank, the note began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found my secret note. You're probably sitting in that garage missing me. Here's what comes next. You keep living. You keep loving. You take care of our family. The best parts of our journey aren't in this bike. They're in your heart where I'll always be. Love, always, Maria. Frank refolded the note with meticulous care. Maria, ever the pragmatist, had always, unfailingly, put family first. She would have sold the bike without a moment's hesitation if it meant ensuring Lily's health. Knowing this, however, did little to ease the heavy ache in his chest. With a sigh that carried the weight of decades, Frank picked up his phone and dialed. Taylor's Classic Motorcycles, he stated, his voice steady despite the tremor in his soul. This is Frank Dawson. I've got a 1987 Heritage I need to sell. The next morning, the sun rose on Frank's last ride. He guided the Harley through the familiar neighborhoods, where he had patiently taught Maria to handle the formidable machine, past the cozy diner where they had shared coffee every Sunday morning, and down the winding country road where she had, at last, felt confident enough to let go of him, raising her arms to the vast open sky in a spontaneous burst of pure joy. When he returned, Frank spent a quiet hour in the garage, meticulously cleaning chrome that was already spotless, a silent, reverent farewell to 35 years of cherished memories. Henderson's motorcycle sales, a sprawling lot where dreams often found new owners, sat on the quiet edge of town. Bill Henderson, the proprietor, was known as a straight shooter, a man who understood that every bike held a story and that every sale carried a deeply personal weight. "That's a beautiful heritage," Henderson said, his eyes tracing the gleaming lines of the Harley with genuine admiration. "Don't see many in this kind of condition anymore? She's been garage kept her whole life, hasn't she? Regular maintenance, original everything." Henderson walked slowly around the bike, his practiced eye taking in every detail, assessing its undeniable quality, noting details that would matter deeply to collectors. "Mind if I ask why you're selling?" he inquired, his tone respectful, devoid of prying judgment. Frank hesitated. The raw truth felt too exposed, too vulnerable. Yet, something in Henderson's sincere demeanor compelled him to open up. "My granddaughter needs medication," he confessed, his voice quiet, strained. "This is the only thing I own worth enough to make a difference." Henderson simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement. He had seen countless such sacrifices on his lot, understood the profound weight of the decisions that brought people to his door. "Let me make some calls," he offered, turning away. "I might have a collector interested." While Henderson worked his phone, a younger man, with grease permanently etched beneath his fingernails, approached the magnificent heritage. "Sir, is this your bike?" he asked, introducing himself as Mason. "It was," Frank replied, a lump forming in his throat. "Just sold her." Mason studied Frank's face with the acute perception of one who truly understood loss. "You don't look like a man who wanted to sell." Frank met his gaze. "Want and need aren't always the same thing," he said, the words heavy with resignation. Mason nodded slowly, absorbing information that, unbeknownst to either man, would soon hold far greater significance. "She's a beauty," he murmured. "Hope whoever gets her knows what they're receiving." Henderson soon returned, paperwork in hand, a flicker of good news in his eyes. $17,000, he announced, a figure that was not only enough for Lily's immediate medication, but even left a cushion for the inevitable, unwelcome surprises that came with chronic illness. With hands that longed to tremble but held firm, Frank signed the papers, accepted the check that now represented his granddaughter's future, and walked away from the motorcycle that had carried him through the most vibrant years of his life. That evening, Frank sat alone in the cavernous silence of his garage. Maria's helmet hung solitary on its hook, a poignant reminder, while the space where the Harley had resided for 35 years was now just an oil stain on the cold concrete. Lily found him there when Jake brought her over for dinner. "Papa, where's your motorcycle?" she asked, her voice tinged with childish curiosity. "I had to sell it, sweetheart," Frank explained gently, pulling her into a warm embrace. "But I got enough money to keep you healthy for a long, long time." Lily gazed up at him, her young eyes possessing an uncanny perception for adult sadness. "Are you mad at me?" she whispered. "I could never be mad at you," Frank assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "You're the most important thing in my world." "Grandma would be proud of you," Lily declared, with the unwavering certainty only an 8-year-old possesses. At her innocent words, tears Frank had held back for days finally streamed down his weathered face. She would have made the same choice, he knew. But what Frank couldn't possibly know was that his profound sacrifice was about to send ripples through a community he never even knew existed. Mason, the young man from Henderson's, couldn't shake the image of the older man from his mind. That quiet dignity, the way Frank had signed those papers as if surrendering a piece of his very soul, haunted Mason through his shift at the county garage, where he routinely maintained emergency vehicles. That evening, Mason logged on to the Iron Brotherhood Forum, a digital sanctuary for riders across 3 states who shared stories, dispensed advice, and occasionally rallied to help one another. His post was simple, direct. "Brothers, I met a man today who sold his Harley to pay for his granddaughter's medication. 68 years old, an Army veteran, rode the same heritage for 35 years. He had to choose between his memories and his family's future. Thought you should know what a real road warrior looks like." The responses were instantaneous, a torrent of solidarity and understanding. "That's a rider who understands what true matters. What's his story? Can we help? Post details. Community takes care of community." Mason shared every detail he knew about Frank, about Lily's daunting condition, about a grandfather's impossible and heartbreaking choice. Within hours, his post had surged across dozens of motorcycle forums: the Christian Motorcycle Association, Women on Wheels, Rolling Thunder, the Vietnam Veterans Motorcycle Club. Each group, in turn, added its own layer of profound respect and unwavering determination. This narrative transcended a simple transaction. It became a testament to a grandfather's ultimate sacrifice, a veteran's lifelong service, and a family facing the crushing weight of medical bankruptcy. This was about values. Every single rider understood loyalty, sacrifice, and the fiercely protective instinct to safeguard the ones you loved. Chapter presidents began making urgent calls. Fundraising coordinators meticulously checked their emergency accounts. Mechanics, their hands already itching for purpose, began scouring listings for heritage Softails that could be restored to absolute perfection. What had begun as one man's simple, heartfelt post was rapidly escalating into a movement, a tidal wave of collective goodwill that would forever change Frank's life in ways he could never have conceived. 2 weeks after selling the Harley, Frank was in his backyard, meticulously fixing Lily's tricycle, when the first engine rumble reached his ears. A low, distant growl somewhere down the street followed quickly by another, then another. Frank straightened up, his mechanic's ear instantly recognizing the distinctive, powerful hum of multiple Harley engines drawing nearer. The sound swelled, growing louder, deeper, echoing the ominous approach of a gathering storm. "Papa, what's that noise?" Lily asked, looking up from her coloring book, her brow furrowed in mild curiosity. Frank walked towards his front yard, the rumble now impossibly loud, shaking the very air around him. He reached the sidewalk just as the first gleaming motorcycle turned onto his quiet street. Then the second, then 10 more, then so many, he simply stopped counting, a seemingly endless parade of chrome and roaring engines. The lead rider pulled gracefully into Frank's driveway, cutting his engine with a decisive click. The sudden silence that followed was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the thunderous symphony that had just filled the neighborhood. Behind him, motorcycles stretched in an unbroken line down both sides of the street, as far as Frank's eyes could see. Riders of every age, from fresh-faced teenagers to grizzled grandparents, men and women, all sat poised, their gazes fixed on Frank with expressions of solemn respect and unwavering determination. Neighbors, drawn by the incredible spectacle, emerged from their houses, some clutching phones, eager to record the unfolding drama. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood on her porch, tears already streaming down her face. The lead rider, a familiar face, removed his helmet and approached Frank. "Are you Frank Dawson?" he asked, his voice clear and strong. "I am," Frank replied, his mind reeling with confusion, yet strangely devoid of fear. These people didn't feel like a threat. They felt like something else entirely. "My name's Mason," the young man continued, a warm, knowing smile touching his lips. "We met at Henderson's 2 weeks ago. You sold your heritage to pay for your granddaughter's medication." Frank nodded, a slow dawning of understanding beginning to bloom in his mind. "Mr. Dawson," Mason continued, his voice now carrying across the quiet street, "word of what you did has spread through the riding community. From here to Colorado, from Texas to Michigan, riders have been talking about the grandfather who chose love over chrome." Mason gestured with a sweeping arm to the multitude of bikes and riders that now filled Frank's street. "These people came because they understand sacrifice. They understand that family comes first. And they understand that a man who makes your choice deserves better than an empty garage." As if on cue, a flatbed trailer pulled up slowly behind the last row of motorcycles. On its spacious deck, covered by a tarp, sat the unmistakable shape of silhouette of a motorcycle. "Mr. Dawson," Mason announced, his voice ringing with profound respect, "the riding community would like to return something that was taken from you. Not your bike, but something even better." Mason signaled to several riders who swiftly moved to the trailer, their hands already untying the massive tarp. "This is a 1987 Heritage Softail, the same year and model as yours, but this one has been rebuilt from the ground up by master mechanics from 6 different states." They pulled away the covering, revealing a motorcycle that gleamed with breathtaking perfection in the afternoon sun. Every piece of chrome was flawless, every curve impeccable. But as Frank moved closer, his eyes widened, his knees suddenly weak as he spotted custom details that transcended mere craftsmanship. Engraved in flowing script on the tank, he read, "Maria's Memory." A small brass plaque mounted discreetly below the speedometer bore the inscription, "For Frank and Lily, love always wins." Stitched in elegant script on the seat itself were the words, "Wherever you ride, I'm with you. Maria." The custom saddlebags, crafted from hand-tooled leather, depicted intricate scenes from the open road, vibrant with life. And hanging from the right mirror, a brand-new helmet, perfectly sized for an 8-year-old girl. Frank's vision blurred, tears blurring his sight as his finger reverently traced Maria's name. "The engine was rebuilt by Tommy Morrison in Denver," Mason continued, his voice filled with reverence. "Paint job by Sarah Chen in Phoenix. Chrome work by the Kowalski brothers in Detroit. Every person who touched this bike knew they were building something sacred." Lily, drawn by the surging crowd and the magnificent machine, appeared at Frank's side. "Papa, is this yours?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Frank couldn't speak. He knelt, pulling Lily into his arms, both of them staring transfixed at the motorcycle that had, impossibly, brought back everything he thought was lost forever. Mason reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "There's one more thing," he said softly. "The writing community took up a collection. It's enough to cover Lily's medication for the next 3 years, with money left over for whatever else she might need." Frank finally found his voice, a choked whisper. "I can't accept this. This is too much." "Mr. Dawson," Mason countered, his gaze firm, "you gave up everything for family. That's what real riders do. That's what real men do. This isn't charity. This is brotherhood." An older woman, clad in well-worn leather riding gear, stepped forward, her eyes kind. "Frank, I lost my husband 2 years ago. He was a rider for 40 years. When I heard your story, I knew he would have wanted to be part of this." A young man, military insignia proudly displayed on his vest, approached next. "Sir, I'm stationed at Fort Carson. When the Veterans Riding Group heard about a fellow soldier who sacrificed for family, we couldn't not help." One by one, riders shared their personal reasons for being there. Some had lost spouses. Others had children or grandchildren battling illnesses. All of them understood with profound clarity that Frank's choice represented something far larger than one man's sacrifice. "Papa," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with wonder, "can we write it?" Frank looked at his granddaughter, then at the sea of faces, the people who had traveled hundreds of miles from countless walks of life to restore what he had believed was gone forever. "Would you like to?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Lily nodded eagerly, her eyes shining, and Frank lifted her onto the seat, settling her comfortably in front of him, just as Maria used to ride. The engine ignited with a perfect rumble, and 35 years of memories surged to life once more. He sacrificed his beloved motorcycle, the last tangible link to his late wife after 40 years of shared adventures on the open road, to fund his granddaughter's life-saving medication. Just 2 weeks later, the quiet of his street was shattered by the thunderous roar of 200 motorcycles. At precisely 6 o'clock each morning for the past 3 years, Frank Dawson had found solace in his garage. Before him, the majestic 1987 Harley Davidson sat in dignified silence, its chrome gleaming under the cool fluorescent lights. At 68, Frank wasn't there to ride. He was there simply to listen, to yearn for the familiar thrum of its engine, a sound etched into his very being. His weathered hands, still possessing the innate wisdom of an army mechanic, traced every contour of the machine. They remembered the slight dent in the tank, a relic of a fierce Montana storm, and the faded Sturgis sticker, marking the spot where Maria, his beloved wife, had once laughed so unrestrainedly she'd nearly tumbled from the back seat. Her worn leather jacket still hung beside his on the wall, a silent testament to countless journeys where she'd clung to him, their bodies moving as one through every curve. Frank had served 22 years as an army mechanic before embracing the tranquil rhythm of Ashbrook. There, he'd opened a modest repair shop and forged a peaceful life with Maria, a school librarian who, surprisingly, had discovered a passion for motorcycles only after meeting him. Their very first date had been a tentative spin around the block. Their last, a sprawling cross-country odyssey to witness the vibrant autumn foliage of Vermont, merely 6 months before cancer cruelly claimed her. 3 years had passed since Maria's absence had left an aching void, and this Harley was the last echo of their shared adventures, a silent sentinel of a love that defied time. What Frank couldn't foresee was that in a matter of hours, he would be forced to confront an impossible decision, one that threatened to shatter his heart entirely. "Papa, why do you come out here every morning?" The innocent question, posed by his 8-year-old granddaughter, Lily, pulled Frank from his reverie. She stood in the doorway, a small figure still clad in her pajamas. Lily had become a more frequent guest these days, her father, Jake, often working grueling double shifts at the manufacturing plant. "Just checking on things, sweetheart," Frank replied softly, turning to face her. Lily approached the imposing motorcycle with a cautious curiosity. Though she didn't fully grasp its significance, she instinctively knew this machine held a profound, almost sacred meaning for her grandfather. "Daddy says Grandma used to ride with you," she observed,